Representative J. Proctor Knott speaks on the Duluth Railroad Bill. Mr. Speaker, if I could be actuated by any conceivable inducement to betray the sacred trust reposed in me by those to whose generous confidence I am indebted for the honor of a seat on this floor, if I could be influenced by any possible consideration to become instrumental in giving away, in violation of these known wishes, any portion of their interest in the public domain for the mere promotion of any railroad enterprise whatever, I should certainly feel a strong inclination to give this measure my most earnest and hearty support, for I am assured that its success would materially enhance the pecuniary prosperity of some of the most valued friends I have on earth, friends for whose accommodation I would be willing to make almost any sacrifice, not involving my personal honor or my fidelity as trustee of an express trust, and that in fact itself would be sufficient to countervail almost any objection I might entertain to the passage of this bill, not inspired by an imperative and inexorable sense of public duty, but independent of the seductive influence of private friendship, to which I admit I am, perhaps, as susceptible as any of the gentlemen I see around me. The intrinsic merit of this measure itself are of such extraordinary character as to commend it most strongly to the favorable consideration of every member of this House, myself not expected, notwithstanding my constituents, in whose behalf alone I am acting here, would not be benefited by its passage one particle more than they would be by a project to cultivate an orange grove on the bleakest summit of Greenland's icy mountains. Now, sir, as to those great trunk lines of railway spanning the continent from ocean to ocean, I confess my mind has never been fully made up. It is true that they may afford some trifling advantages to local traffic, and they may even in time become the channels of a more extended commerce. Yet I have never been thoroughly satisfied, either of the necessity or the expediency of projects promising such meager results to the great body of our people. But with regard to the transcendent merits of the gigantic enterprise contemplated in this bill, I have never entertained the shadow of a doubt. Years ago, when I first heard that there was somewhere in the vast terra incognita, somewhere in the bleak regions of the great Northwest, a stream of water known to the nomadic inhabitants of the neighborhood as the River St. Croix, I became satisfied that the construction of a railroad from that raging torrent to some point in the civilized world was essential to the happiness and prosperity of the American people, if not absolutely indispensable to the perpetuity of republican institutions on this continent. I felt instinctively that the boundless resources of that prolific region of sand and pine shrubbery would never be fully developed without a railroad constructed and equipped at the expense of the government, and perhaps not then. I had an abiding presentiment that some day or other people of this whole country, irrespective of party affiliations, regardless of sectional prejudices, and without distinction of race, color, or previous condition of servitude, would rise in their majesty and demand an outlet for the enormous agricultural productions of those vast and fertile pine barrens, drained in the rainy seasons by the surging waters of the turbid St. Croix. Now, sir, I repeat, I have been satisfied for years that if there was any portion of the inhabited grove absolutely in a suffering condition for want of a railroad, it was these teeming pine barrens of the St. Croix. And what particular point on that noble stream such a road should be commenced, I knew was immaterial. And so it seems to have been considered by the draftsman of this bill. It might be up at the spring, or down at the footlog, or the water gate, or the fish dam, or anywhere along the bank, no matter where. But in what direction it should run, or where it should terminate, were always to my mind questions of the most painful perplexity. I could conceive of no place on God's green earth in such straitened circumstances for railroad facilities as to be likely to desire or willing to accept such a connection. I knew that neither Bayfield nor Superior City would have it, for they both indignantly spurned the munificence of the government when coupled with such ignominious conditions, and let this very same land grant die on their hands years and years ago, rather than submit to the degradation of a direct communication by railroad with the piney woods of the St. Croix. And I know what the enterprising inhabitants, those giant young cities, would refuse to take would have a few charms for others, whatever their necessities or cupidity might be. Hence, as I have said, sir, I was utterly at a loss to determine where the terminus of this great and indispensable road should be, until I accidentally overheard some gentleman the other day mention the name of Duluth. Duluth! The word fell upon my ear with peculiar and indescribable charm, like the gentle murmur of a low fountain stealing forth from the midst of the roses, or the soft, sweet accents of an angel's whisper in the bright, joyous dream of sleeping innocence. Duluth! 'Twas the name for which my soul had panted for years, as the hart panteth for the water of brooks. But where was Duluth? Never in all my limited reading had my vision been gladdened by seeing the celestial word in print, and I felt a profounder humiliation in my ignorance that its dulcet syllables had never before ravaged my delighted ear. I was certain the draftsman of this bill had never heard of it, or it would have been designated as one of the termini of this road. I asked my friends about it, but they knew nothing of it. I rushed to the library and examined all the maps I could find. I discovered in one of them a delicate, hair-like line diverging from the Mississippi near a place marked Prescott, which I suppose was intended to represent the river St. Croix, but I could nowhere find Duluth. Nevertheless, I was confident it existed somewhere, and that its discovery would constitute the crowning glory of the present century, if not all modern times. I knew it was bound to exist in the very nature of things, that the symmetry and perfection of our planetary system would be incomplete without it, that the elements of material nature would long since have restored themselves back into original chaos if there had been such a hiatus in creation as would have resulted from leaving out Duluth. In fact, sir, I was overwhelmed with the conviction that Duluth not only existed somewhere, but that, wherever it was a great and glorious place. I was convinced that the greatest calamity that ever befell the benighted nations of the ancient world was in their having passed away without a knowledge of the actual existence of Duluth, that their fabled Atlantis, never seen save by the hallowed vision of inspired poesy, was in fact but another name for Duluth, that the golden orchard of the Hesperides was but a poetical synonym for the beer gardens in the vicinity of Duluth. I was certain that Herodotus had died a miserable death, because in all his travels and with all his geographical research he had never heard of Duluth. I knew that if the immortal spirit of Homer could look down from another heaven than that created by his own celestial genius upon the long lines of pilgrims from every nation of the earth to the gushing fountain of poesy opened by the touch of his magic wand, if he could be permitted to behold the vast assemblage of grand and glorious productions of the lyric art called into being by his own inspired strains, he would weep tears of bitter anguish that, instead of lavishing all the stores of his mighty genius upon the fall of Ilion, it had not been his more blessed lot to crystallize in deathless song the rising glories of Duluth. Yet, sir, had it not been for this map, kindly furnished me by the legislature of Minnesota, I might have gone down to my obscure and humble grave in an agony of despair, because I could nowhere find Duluth. Had such been my melancholy fate, I have no doubt that with the last feeble pulsation of my beating heart, the last fading exhalation of my fleeting breath, I should have whispered, "Where is Duluth?" But thanks to the beneficence of that band of ministering angels who have their bright abodes in the far-off capital of Minnesota, just as the agony of my anxiety was about to culminate in the frenzy of despair, this blessed map was placed in my hands, and as I unfolded it, a resplendent scene of ineffable glory opened before me, such as I imagined burst upon the enraptured vision of the wandering Peri through the opening of paradise. There, for the first time, my enchanted eye rested upon the ravishing word Duluth. This map, sir, is intended, as it appears from its title, to illustrate the position of Duluth in the United States, but if gentlemen will examine it, I think they will concur with me that in the opinion that it is far too modest in its pretensions. It not only illustrates the position of Duluth in the United States, but exhibits its relations with all created things. It even goes further than this. It lifts the shadowy veil of futility and affords us a view of the golden prospects of Duluth far along the dim vista of ages yet to come. If gentlemen will examine it, they will find Duluth not only in the center of the map, but represented in the center of a series of concentric circles 100 miles apart, and some of them as much as 4,000 miles in diameter, spreading alike in their tremendous sweep, fragrant savannas of the sunlit south, and the eternal solicitudes of snow that mantle the ice-bound north. How these circles were produced is, perhaps, one of the most primordial mysteries that the most skillful paleologist will never be able to explain. But the fact is, sir, Duluth is preeminently a central place, for I am told by gentlemen who have been so reckless of their own personal safety as to venture away into those awful regions where Duluth is supposed to be, that it is so exactly in the center of the visible universe that the sky comes down at precisely the same distance all around it. I find by reference to this map that Duluth is situated somewhere near the western end of Lake Superior, but as there is no dot or other mark indicating its exact location, I am unable to say whether it is actually confined to any particular spot or whether it is just lying around there loose. I really cannot tell whether it is one of those ethereal creations of intellectual frostwork, more intangible than the rose-tinted cloud of a summer sunset, one of those airy exhalations of the speculator's brain, which I am told are ever flitting from the forms of towns and cities along those lines of railroad, built with government subsidies, luring the unwary settler as the mirage of the death lures the famishing traveler on and ever on, till it fades away on the darkening horizon, or whether it is a real, bona fide, substantial city, all staked off with the lots marked with their owners' names, like the proud commercial metropolis recently discovered on the desirable shores of San Domingo. But, however that may be, I am satisfied Duluth is there, or thereabout, for I see it stated here on this map that it is exactly 3,990 miles from Liverpool, though I have no doubt, for the sake of convenience, it will be moved back 10 miles, so as to make the distance an even 4,000. Then, sir, there is the climate of Duluth, unquestionably the most salubrious and delightful to be found anywhere on the Lord's earth. Now, I have always been under the impression, as I presume other gentlemen have, that in the region around Lake Superior it was cold enough for at least 9 months in the year to freeze the smokestack off a locomotive. But I see it represented on this map that Duluth is situated exactly halfway between the latitudes of Paris and Venice, so that gentlemen who have inhaled exhilarating airs of the one, or basked in the golden sunlight of the other, may see at a glance that Duluth may be a place of untold delights, a terrestrial paradise, fanned by the balmy zephyrs of an eternal spring, clothed in the gorgeous sheen of ever-blooming flowers, and vocal with the silvery melody of nature's choicest songsters. In fact, sir, since I have seen this map, I have no doubt that Byron, so vainly endeavoring to convey some faint conception of this delicious charm of Duluth, when his poetic soul gushed forth in the rippling strains of that beautiful rhapsody. Know ye the land of cedar and vine, where the flowers ever blossom, the beams ever shine, where the light wings of zephyr, oppressed with perfume, wax faint o'er the gardens of gull in her bloom, where the citron and olive are fairest of fruit, and the voice of the nightingale never is mute, where the tints of the earth and the lines of the sky, in color though varied, in beauty may vie. As to the commercial resources of Duluth, sir, they are simply illimitable and inexhaustible, as is shown by this map. I see it stated here that there is a vast scope of territory, embracing an area of over 2 million square miles, rich in every element of material wealth and commercial prosperity, all tributary to Duluth. Look at it, sir. Here are the inexhaustible mines of gold, immeasurable veins of silver, impenetrable depths of boundless forest, vast coal measures, wide, extended plains of richest pasture, all embraced in this vast territory, which must, in the very nature of things, empty the untold treasures of its commerce into the lap of Duluth. Look at it, sir. Do you not see from these broad brown lines drawn around this immense territory that the enterprising inhabitants of Duluth intend some day to enclose it all in one vast corral, so that its commerce will be bound to go there, whether it would or not? And here, sir, I find, within a convenient distance, the pagan Indians, which, of all the many accessories to the glory of Duluth, I consider by far the most inestimable. For, sir, I have been told that when the smallpox breaks out among the women and children of that famous tribe, as it sometimes does, they afford the finest subjects in the world for the strategic experiments of any enterprising military hero who desires to improve himself in the noble art of war, especially for any valiant lieutenant general whose trenchant blade, Toledo trusty, for want of fighting has gone rusty, and eats into itself for lack of somebody to hew and hack. Sir, the great conflict now raging in the old world has presented a phenomena in military science unprecedented in the annals of mankind. A phenomena that has reversed all the traditions of the past as it has disappointed all the expectations of the present. A great and warlike people, renowned alike for their skill and valor, have been swept away before the triumphant advance of an inferior foe, like autumn stubble before a hurricane of fire. For aught I know, the next flash of electric fire that shimmers along the ocean cable may tell us that Paris, with every fiber quivering with the agony of impotent despair, writhes beneath the conquering heel of her loathed invader. Ere another moon shall wax and wane, the brightest star in the galaxy of nations may fall from the zenith of her glory, never to rise again. Ere the modest violets of early spring shall open their beauteous eyes, the genius of civilization may chant the wailing requiem of the proudest nationality the world has ever seen, as she scatters her withered and tear-moistened lilies o'er the bloody tomb of butchered France. But, sir, I wish to ask if you honestly and candidly believe that the Dutch would have ever overrun the French in that kind of style if General Sheridan had not gone over there and told King William and von Moltke how he had managed to whip the pagan Indians. And here, sir, recurring to the map, I find in the immediate vicinity of the Piegans vast herds of buffalo and immense fields of rich wheatlands. I was remarking, sir, upon these vast wheat fields represented on the map in the immediate neighborhood of the buffaloes and the Piegans, and was about to say that the idea of there being these immense wheat fields in the very heart of a wilderness, hundreds and hundreds of miles beyond the utmost verge of civilization, may appear to some gentlemen as rather incongruous, as rather too great a strain on the blankets of veracity. But to my mind there is no difficulty in the matter whatever. The phenomena is very easily accounted for. It is evident, sir, that the Piegans sowed that wheat there and plowed it with buffalo bulls. Now, sir, this fortunate combination of buffaloes and Piegans, considering their relative positions to each other and to Duluth, as they are arranged on this map, satisfies me that Duluth is destined to be the beef market of the world. Here, you will observe, are the buffaloes, directly between the Piegans and Duluth. And here, right on the road to Duluth, are the creeks. Now, sir, when the buffaloes are sufficiently fat from grazing on these immense wheat fields, you see it will be the easiest thing in the world for the Piegans to drive them down, stay all night with their friends the Creeks, and go into Duluth in the morning. I think I see them now, sir, a vast herd of buffaloes, with their heads down, their eyes glaring, their nostrils dilated, their tongues out, and their tails curled over the backs, tearing along toward Duluth, with about 1,000 Piegans on their grass-bellied ponies, yelling at their heels. On they come, and as they sweep past the creeks, they join the chase, and away they all go, yelling, bellowing, ripping, and tearing along, amid clouds of dust, until the last buffalo is safely penned in the stockyards of Duluth. Sir, I might stand here for hours and hours, and expatiate with rapture upon the gorgeous prospects of Duluth, as depicted upon the map. But human life is too short, and the time of this house is far too valuable to allow me to linger longer upon the delightful theme. I think every gentleman on this floor is as well satisfied as I am that Duluth is destined to become the commercial metropolis of the universe, and that this road should be built at once. I am fully persuaded that no patriotic representative of the American people who has a proper appreciation of the associated glories of Duluth and the St. Croix will hesitate a moment to say every able-bodied female in the land between the ages of 18 and 45 who is in favor of women's rights should be drafted and set to work upon this great work without delay. Nevertheless, sir, it grieves my very soul to be compelled to say that I cannot vote for the grant of lands provided for in this bill. Ah, sir, you can have no conception of the poignancy of my anguish that I am deprived of that blessed privilege. There are two insuperable obstacles in the way. In the first place, my constituents, from whom I am acting here, have no more interest in this road than they have in the great question of culinary taste, now perhaps agitating the public minds of Dominica, as to whether the illustrious commissioners who recently left this capital for that free and enlightened republic would be better fricasseed, boiled, or roasted. And in the second place, these lands, which I am asked to give away, alas, are not mine to bestow. My relation to them is simply that of trustee to an express trust. And shall I ever betray that trust? Never, sir. Rather perish Duluth, perish the paragon of cities. Rather let the freezing cyclones of the bleak northwest bury it forever beneath the eddying sands of the raging St. Croix.